So I think this card, Protection of the Heckma, is a contender for doing the most world building of any single card in the history of Magic.
Yeah, there's a long tradition of stories being set in a safe place, whose inhabitants view the outside world as terrible, dystopian, or horrifying in some way.
And the stories that start there can go in a lot of different directions. Everything from fairy tales like Rapunzel, where the danger of the outside world is overblown or fully fabricated, or like the Fallout games or show, where the danger is real, but in both cases, the story and the themes are focused on abuse of power and trust by authority figures.
Then you also have things like zombie movies or shows where the danger is real, and you get a lot of stories about hubris or selfishness of a resident of the safe place, either destroying it for everyone. You see a lot of nihilism in those kinds of stories. It's kind of in the DNA of the zombie genre, like going back to Night of the Living Dead. So
Yeah,
that's another angle.
So with Amonkhet, we kind of get both of those.
Yeah, a little bit.
But to make any stories of that category work, at least to make them work really well, I think we, the audience, need to really understand what the world feels like to inhabit for the people who live in that safe place.
So today we're going to talk about the incredible job that this Protection of the Heckma and the roughly 30 to 40 cards within the set that take place or show outside the Heckma did to create the world of Amonkhet as we experienced it on release.
So the way that we, the audience, were introduced to Amonkhet was substantially different than the first visit we typically get to a plane. Usually we start off narratively accompanying one of the inhabitants of that new world. Like Rashmi was the first story set on Kaladesh, and we followed her around for a bit. Or Ingra Runeyes in Kaldheim. Or we might start from the perspective of an established character, like Liliana on Strixhaven, but she still kind of takes us around existing in the world. So one way or another, we have a surrogate who shows us what it's like to live in that world on an everyday basis. And when there are big plot twists or reveals, we experience those from basically the same perspective as the characters existing in the world. We share their understanding of the world.
So Amonkhet was different to a degree because the Gatewatch arrives as a group of outsiders, and they know the twist. They know the big reveal that's coming.
Yeah. This is verbatim the way the story starts.
Deciding that a proactive approach is best, most of the Gatewatch has gone after Nicol Bolas on Amonkhet to attack him head-on before he can set more of his schemes in motion. With no plan and no information, 5 planeswalkers set off to take down an Elder Dragon on a mysterious and unfamiliar plane.
Yeah. So they first encounter, well, they just land in the middle of the desert. Land? Is that what planeswalkers do?
You know,
They planeswalk to the desert.
get there.
The city's not visible. It's a sandstorm. They're then attacked by a ton of zombies and worms. But they get through that and they notice the city. They head for the city. They enter the city. Once they get there, they do start interacting with the people who live there. And from there, the stories do a great job of teasing out the details of Noctamun's society and culture. But everything that's revealed in the stories in that way is really focused on what goes on inside the city and the shape of that culture.
And understanding the perspective of the people who grew up in Noctamun, whose everyday life includes looking through a transparent barrier into a wasteland full of nightmares that wanted to rip them apart, I think is very fundamental to making the rest of the story really land.
Yeah.
And to a large degree, making it believable that an entire group or society of people would buy so wholeheartedly into a death cult. Because, I mean, look at the alternative.
And so eventually we did get a story from the perspective of the inhabitants, specifically from Jeru and Samut's childhood and a third kid who does not survive the story. But that was the 7th story released, Trespass. And nowadays they release all the stories in advance of the set. Trespass was released 2 weeks after the set was released. So what I really want to talk about today is the perspective of those inside the city as we could understand it from just the cards in the set, because the story didn't give us that window at the time.
And that brings us back to
protection of the Heckma, which is just, I know I said it at the start, but I think this is profoundly, well, I wanted to say moving, and that's also true. Like, that makes me feel something. It is a child whose play has taken them right to the edge of a horde of zombies who want to eat them. And that just says so much about this world, that everyone who lives here grows up and that's their experience. You know, just everything they do as they learn about the world, as they learn to speak, to walk, there's the evil zombies.
Yes. I love how this has this sharp line right through it where you have this peaceful, like idyllic little pool and the very neat manicured hedges. Yeah. And then outside,
there's even a little dog there that if we look at the
oh, there is, look at that. Just
you can't see that at card size really tell what it is, but yeah,
you have just this happy little friend up there. The child's like playing with a ball, and then out's just right in front of that, just hordes of zombies pressed up against the window.
And the dust storm both presents a second threat that the Heckma's protecting you from, but also provides a cool ambiguity about how many zombies there are.
Yes. Yes, it does. Yeah, because this feels like we can only see the ones that are right up against the barrier.
Yeah.
And that there are probably many more beneath the sands.
Yeah. And the kid doesn't seem panicked. They're just kind of looking.
Yeah, I mean, as horrible as this is, if you grew up there, this is reality.
Yeah.
So it's not shocking. It's just those are the zombies that live on the other side of the barrier. There they are.
It's like, don't walk in the street. There's cars. Don't cross the Heckma. There's zombies.
But there's also a level of trust here that we know that they can't come in. The Heckma protects us.
Yeah.
So as long as you stay over here, everything's fine. Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure.
But all that suggests, so why are there all these zombies? And that takes us to the Curse of Wandering. Do you want to read it out?
Sure. So the Curse of Wandering is part of the magic of Amonkhet that Bolas has been able to exploit. It is a necromantic phenomenon called the Curse of Wandering. This naturally occurring magic causes any being who dies on the plane to rise again after a short time, cursed with insatiable hunger and an irresistible drive to attack the living. Desiccated mummies created by the Curse of Wandering fill the desert wasteland that dominates the plane, constantly threatening what little life remains. But the people of Amonkhet do not fear the threat of attack as much as they dread the knowledge that all who live will one day die and fall under the same curse. Death under the effect of the Curse of Wandering is a terrifying afterlife filled with endless suffering.
Yeah, this is a fundamental concept of the plane. And it is described on the cards here, but I think given all the history we now have available, we have been told repeatedly by the Planeswalkers guide that they published, which is like the D&D supplement, by lots of things, that the Curse of Wandering is an inherent attribute of Amonkhet. It's not something that Nicol Bolas brought. There's a flashback story where we see Nicol Bolas showing up and corrupting the gods and everything, and Heckma already exists. They are already being guarded from the outside. But when the cards first released, I think we had some sense that that was the deal, but Lord of the Accursed, or Accursed?
I don't know.
Yeah. I'm going to say Accursed because I enjoy it's more
I like
it's more dramatic to say.
It feels dramatic.
Accursed.
Yes.
But that gives us the name of the curse, gives it that title.
And it leaves only hatred. In the flavor text, it says the Curse of Wandering leaves only hatred.
Indeed.
So this is not a desirable... I mean, I guess most curses are not considered desirable. But, I mean, this is obviously not something, aside from the ability to resurrect shortly after death, apparently. This is not something where you're gaining... It's not a curse where you're, like, gaining power.
It's not a cool curse.
It's not a cool curse.
It's not deciding to be a lich.
It is not. It is not that.
It is just this thing that happens to absolutely everything that dies on Amonkhet.
It doesn't seem to discriminate.
And though we are focused on life outside the Heckma today, like all of the the anointed, the mummies, the white zombie creatures in this set, they are all suffering from the curse of wandering, but the whole point of the civilization, the bonus of living in the Heckma, is that they have a way to rein it in, and they put a cartouche on the zombie and the zombie becomes well behaved.
Yeah, they've harnessed it so that
Yeah.
they can continue to be productive members of society instead of this,
Yeah.
Lord of the Accursed.
Right. So again, that's really selling the reason that people want to be part of the society that has a way to control that. And, you know, they have the whole anointed process that turns you into a much more docile zombie. But that's no one's ideal. No one wants to become anointed. They all want to succeed and become an eternal.
Ideal situation. I think this is also a really. I'm just going to interject this here, and we can cut it if there's not time. But I think this is also a really cool take on the obvious ties that Amonkhet has to real life Egypt and the efforts that they went to mummify the dead and try to preserve them and keep life going in a way that, you know, otherwise was not possible as part of their lore and belief system.
Yeah.
That the alternative was truly to be lost versus getting to carry on your life and continue to have some society. Which I think is really cool that they incorporated that, because that was such a big part of ancient Egyptian society. Yeah, and on the cards itself, there was one card that we had here, the Dunes of the Dead, that actually referenced the Curse of Wandering permeating Amonkhet long before Nicol Bolas, and that he simply harnessed it. So even without that little supplemental
But that
bit,
came from our
that
devastation.
was an hour, so we don't get that bit until later. But
Right. And so there are quite a few of the cards that depict life outside of the Heckma or unlife outside the Heckma are just depictions basically of this phenomenon. Wander in death. It's just a bunch of humanoids rising. Undead style. Grasping Dunes. Similar deal.
yeah, Grasping Dunes kind of looks like just a bunch of bodies coming up out of the dunes.
Yeah.
And you can see their arms, limbs, things just poking out. It's one of the things I really like about this is that some stories where you start out in this kind of bubble, if you will, ultimately end with finding out that, oh, things are actually really great outside, or there's been some kind of interior deceit, and oh, imagine,
Logan's Run!
Yeah, oh, imagine
okay.
what if we had known about the outside, and then this is very much not that. Like, nothing good is happening outside the head.
It is truly terrible.
It is. It's a bad time.
So moving on just a little bit to the concept of dissenters. The entirety of civilization on Amonkhet lives within Naktamun. As far as everyone who lives there knows, and as far as we, the audience, know as well, at least until after these stories conclude and they go somewhere else. But there are a whole bunch of zombies depicted on cards that are humanoid, that are of the races from Naktamun.
Yes.
So, where'd they come from? They came from dissenters. Heretics, basically. This is how they purge the heresy. Doom to Dissenter is just a really straightforward example of that. And there are quite a few cards that refer to exile, like Cast Down, I think is the depiction of someone being carried out of the city.
Yeah.
And the Bone Picker, the flavor text on that one.
Yes, they are the first to greet dissenters on their journey into exile.
Yeah. Once we get further into the stories, Samut actually, I think, is treated as a dissenter, and she gets put in a sarcophagus type thing out in the street for a while, and then they're gonna... Well, you have to read the stories for that. But it seems like dissenters... I don't know what might all be the causes of dissent. Samut actually kind of figured out what had actually happened. Obvious why that would be considered heresy and they wouldn't be cool with that, but I don't know what. Maybe some people just don't want to join in the death cult because they don't want to die. Pretty, base instinct kicking in, and that gets them.
Well, and I think there's something to be said for that, is that, like, you're presented with this. Sure, the alternative is that you wander in death forever, which is not ideal, but there's this idea that, like, oh, this has just been decided. Like, you don't get you don't get to die regardless, but
Yeah.
this is how you're going to spend your wandering undeath. And, like,
Yeah.
not everybody wants to be told that you're going to continue to be a productive member of society.
Yeah.
Maybe, despite its grim reality, perhaps some people just oppose being told how they're going to spend their wandering.
Yeah. Fair enough.
But yeah, that's up for debate, I guess.
Yeah.
What?
Doomed Dissenter in particular, I think, was neat because Doomed Traveler was put in Innistrad a few years earlier. It's a 1/1 white card that makes a 1/1 spirit when it
Makes a
dies,
spirit.
a white spirit. But here we have the black card, Doomed Dissenter, who turns into a zombie. The mechanism of that seems real obvious, in the same way that the Doomed Traveler did. Like, the flavor of that card works really well, but I thought it was interesting that they made this a black card instead of a white card. And I think that's in the essence of Dissent and Amonkhet's primarily, or the Bolas cult, whatever you want to call it. The primary religion is very collectivist.
Yeah.
I mean, sort of. It has the whole ambition
way.
push, but you opt into that society. You participate in that society.
It's
You're
kind
supposed
of
to be,
not you're voluntold.
yeah, you're voluntold.
Yeah.
And so I think just independent thought is probably what makes this
Yeah.
portrayal, this concept, a black card rather than any other color
Yeah.
card.
I get that. I mean, white is more of the collectivist, the group think, it's not necessarily, black is very much more individualist.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that does feel like that would be kind of incompatible with their societal values.
Yeah. Until you get to the Trial of Ambition,
Yeah.
but we can't.
Yeah.
Can't spin forever on that.
I mean, I think they're fine with, like, ambition as long as your ambition serves the God Pharaoh.
Yeah.
Like, if your ambition is too self-centered,
Yeah.
that's right out.
Fair enough. So then we can just look at a whole lot of the individual zombie creatures in this set, and it's very clear that, again, they are of the races that exist in Noctamoon. They're not from outside the Heckman.
Yeah.
They have clothes
They do.
that are falling apart in
Yeah,
tatters.
they've seen better days.
Yeah.
But yeah, they are all races or groups of entities that have been represented within the city. These are not something where we're only seeing jackals outside, or
Right.
we're only seeing minotaurs out here in the wasteland.
Yeah. And in the player's guide here, which came with the bundle, they have quite a few pages dedicated to world building excerpts, basically. And one of them, on the subject of dissenters, if I can find it. Unworthy dissenters. Even in the paradise-like oasis of Noctamoon, there are dissenters who doubt the teaching of the God Pharaoh. They refuse to follow a path that would lead them to the afterlife. Punishment for dissenters is severe. Angels bind them in special sarcophagi called Tombs of Disgrace, which leave the prisoners' hands exposed. The sarcophagi line the streets of Noctamoon for all to look upon in what is known as the Display of Doubt. When the Display of Doubt concludes, the angels carry the dissenters through the Heckma and into the desert beyond, where they are left to be consumed by the curse of wandering. Look real close at Never on Never to Return. What do you see in the back of that?
Oh, hey.
Is that my imagination or is that an angel?
I think that's an angel. It looks like...
The art on these is so small that
Yeah.
I've never noticed until today, but I think that's an angel
Yeah.
who just carried a dissenter out.
Yep, and
To be
then
consumed by
on
the
the
curse?
return half, I think we're seeing. If you look at the clothes, like that's
Yeah.
very clearly meant to be the same
Same, yeah,
person who has now been consumed by the curse.
Yep. Yeah,
Wow,
there you go.
That's grim.
Uh-huh. But, like, neat.
It is neat.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, obviously.
We know what we're about.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the Wayward Servant, being the black-white card, has the elements of both types of zombies, the obedient helpers and the feral ones in the wastes. And it started off as an anointed, and apparently, according to the flavor text, it just was found wanting.
Yes.
And so they kicked it out, and then it just did that, yeah. The other...
He got laid off.
Backing up to Wander and Death,
Yeah.
I perceive a logistics problem here. Forever restless, forever growing in number. It seems like their bodies would just fall apart, especially with all these big sandstorms always whipping around. And
Yeah,
don't know.
at what point do they
Just fall to dust.
do they crumble into dust, or is there like a wandering overpopulation problem outside the Heckma that we don't get to explore?
Yeah, I mean, every time it comes up in the story, there's a lot of them. So I don't know. I guess, well, if the natural arid air of the desert just desiccates everything in a mummy-ish fashion, mummy-esque fashion, maybe they just last a really long time that way. I think this is probably the sort of thing one shouldn't think too deeply about.
Now I'm thinking about it really
Sorry.
deeply.
Okay, but besides zombies, we know there's a bunch of humanoid zombies out in the desert, but there are cards in a variety of colors, well, in the Jund colors, that represent other creatures out there.
Yeah, and they're all kind of terrifying.
Yeah, there's nothing.
There's no cute capybaras. There's no beautiful unicorns. There's no. We don't even get any like cutesy little poison dart frog like we had in Ixalan.
Yeah.
Like they're all kind of horrifying.
Yeah.
Like we have the giant wasteland scorpion. I perceive it as being really big, even though it's just a tutu.
Me too. Well, a tutu is a bear.
A tutu is a bear, so
So maybe it's like a dog-sized scorpion, because maybe a
which is
dog-sized
still-
scorpion is as threatening as a bear.
yeah. I mean, that's still. I think a lot of people
I
would
do
find that
not
really
want to deal with
threatening.
that. Yeah.
I think many people
I
would be
would find
very
that
threatened
very
by
threatening.
a dog-sized scorpion.
Yep.
And then you have things like the Desert Ceradon, which is just a giant beast. You see it knocking over an obelisk. Like, it's just all these scary creatures. The Hyena
Yeah.
Pack. They're just a 3/4 vanilla, but the art is very ominous. I mean, like none of these creatures are things that you would want to encounter if an angel just dropped you off in the sands.
And backing up to the premise of what does this look like from the perspective of those living inside the Heckma. They look out, and if they're seeing anything other than zombies, it's these things.
It's this. Yeah.
It is not inviting.
And the barrier's transparent, so they
Completely,
can see
yeah.
what's. It's not a situation where they're just like hearing the screams of their
Yeah.
of their former neighbors. Like they can
Yeah.
see what's happening outside, and it's this. There's a giant spider reprint in this set, which I am very excited about.
Yes.
Because that's my favorite card in Magic.
And you have almost every
I have
copy.
almost every copy.
Yeah.
Almost. There's a few I'm missing.
What are you missing?
But, I'm missing Summer Magic, which
That makes sense.
that's my white whale.
Yeah,
And there's a handful of. I don't think I ever picked up the 30th anniversary one.
that makes sense.
There's just a couple of those, but like
Yeah.
I have the Alpha, Beta, and Limited revised, like the ones that really matter.
Yeah.
There's just a couple random ones. But anyway, I love this depiction, and this one's got some cool flavor text on this giant spider about how the broken lands are littered with the remnants of civilizations long dead and infested by terrors very much alive.
Yeah.
So this is kind of all that's out here.
Yeah.
Is just...
And some of these terms, like the broken lands, I think now you can go onto the wiki and look and see what they were. But at first, that was like, what is the broken lands? Is that just the name for outside? And there were a few things like that. And then the ChefNet monitor, or the Chefette. Chefette? However you say that word. There's also Chefette Dunes, and there are a few cards that make it pretty clear that's a region. But when the card set first comes out, there's just a lot of unknowns that are cool that they're unknown.
Yeah, I think the Dune Beetle also references the Chefette.
Oh, yep.
The scouring sands of Chefette polish its carapace, and the ranks of the cursed fill its belly.
Yeah. Well, that's a really interesting factor. That kind of explains how some of these creatures are living in with all these zombies.
So
They
maybe that's
just eat
what's
some of them.
happening to
That's how the population
extra
cycle.
zombie. Yeah, that's why we don't have just like zombies wall to wall up against the Heckmas that these guys are cleaning up after.
But they are not immune to the curse of wandering.
No, everything that
Everywhere it's
dies
described,
here
everything comes back.
comes back.
So we have Blighted Bat,
Plague Belcher.
and those might be the only depictions of wildlife coming back. In the core set, there was an invocation, attrition that shows a sandworm being reanimated, and that's not a supposition because it's literally that picture accompanies that happening in the story that Wizards published. The Blighted Bat has a really cool flavor text that explains a big art decision here. Like a lot of the black cards and a lot of these creepy cards, they're dark. They're kind of moody. But the premise of Amonkhet, one of the other premises, is that there are two suns and one of them is always up. It
Yes,
is.
there's no nighttime.
There's no
here.
nighttime.
Yeah.
So,
Which is cool because when you look at I was remembering when we were initially talking about doing this video and we were looking at the card file, I was really struck by how much light there is in so much of the art in this set.
Yeah.
Overall.
Yeah.
Like, even on these cards that are kind of gloomy or where you have
Yeah.
sandstorms, they're still very lit up compared to some other sets that we've explored.
I think that's a large part of the explanation. But the flavor text there makes that real explicit. Amonkhet's dual suns don't
just
allow for
spells
the
it out.
darkness
There
of
is no
night,
dark.
so bats are most active under the gloom of the frequent sandstorms. So it's all sandstorms. And yeah, so that explains the look of Dune Beetle, of Wasteland Scorpion, of all the zombie creatures, the Cursed Minotaur, Dread Wanderer, all of that. The Bone Picker.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it lets the art have that variety of palette a little bit. That's cool.
It is very cool.
Then this last category of cards that just a couple fit into that I have are these otherworldly, mysterious things that it seems like the inhabitants have seen based on the... well, they're both type horror, too. At least, you know what? Horror of the Broken Lands, that's neat. I don't care about it. I want to talk about Grim Strider.
Yeah.
Grim Strider is so cool.
It is really cool. I like it too.
Yeah, it's my second favorite of this subject, right below Protection of the Heckma, because it's just so unworldly and so giant. It conveys that sense of scale, but it's distant enough to just to embody the unknown.
Yeah, I love the endless arms. Like, the
Yes.
anatomy of this thing is so perplexing.
Yeah. It's like, is this what someone missaw and it was
Yeah.
really something else? But like, we just don't know, and it's so cool and creepy.
Yeah, I love how it's a very beautiful piece of art, but the pose and the colors and the way it's kind of hidden slightly behind a sandstorm, it kind of gives that like blurry cryptid photo where you're like, well, it could be this, it could be like, is it really something? Is it some unknown horror, or is this just like is this a known animal that I'm misperceiving in some way?
Yeah.
I really like that. And then I assume those are angels in front of it.
I think those are Aven zombies.
Are they Aven zombie? Okay, because that's right. There are Avens in
Yeah,
this,
that's
in this world.
because
So.
it's basically 5 humanoid races, and they're kind of color aligned. Like the Naga are blue green, so and the Avid are kind of like the blue white ones.
Yeah, that one
Yeah.
is very cool.
And you know what? It kind of bookends Protection of the Heckma nicely, because the flavor text is talking about the experience of growing up here. As a child, I saw something walking in the distance far beyond the Heckma. And that I think is what really resonated with me when I was looking through these cards when they first released, and just made this such a cool world that I would not want to live in, but it's really cool.
Yeah, this is one of those places. There's a couple of really pretty locations that make me think like, oh, I would want to visit that. But like the more you think
Yeah.
about it, it's like, do I actually
Yeah.
want to planeswalk there? Maybe not. Maybe just for a day
Yeah.
and then leave.
There are a couple of other things that have to do with the flavor of the world outside the Heckma, but that don't represent things the inhabitants of Noctamoon would know about. But I really want to talk about them a little
They're
bit.
pretty neat.
Yeah. Starting with the demons and Ifnir.
Yes, we have the Archfiend of Ifnir,
Yeah.
which is a demon creature. There's also a demonic entity on Dispossess.
I think it's the same one.
Is it the same one? It kind
Or-
of has the same
It seems like
shaped
yeah.
head.
Yeah. I don't know if that's because we
Yeah.
see in the next set, Razakath shows up, and he doesn't look exactly like that. So it's not like every single demon here has
That's
that
true.
exact look, but I don't know. Those two look so similar that it feels like they came from the same design. I don't know. And the other thing we have about Ifnir is the flavor text on Cradle of the Accursed. Many such monuments dot the wasteland known as Ifnir.
Yeah, so this is again alluding to there are ruins outside the Heck.
Yeah, that segues
Some
into
civilization. There was something out there before
Yeah.
the city of Naktamun.
Right.
It predates that.
It is really cool to see on lots of cards a couple of the basic lands, rags on rags to riches. You see all these ruins just out there, and we've never got an answer as to how big this civilization was.
Yeah.
Are these part of Panorama? Look at how that forest and this mountain flow together. It's like that's
They might.
part of a gate, or I mean a fence that kind of the same.
They might be. We need to look at the other ones. Did we just discover something?
I don't think so, because like the
No.
island doesn't fit into that at all.
That might just be a coincidence, but that's
Yeah,
really
okay.
cool.
Yeah. Is it? Oh, they're different artists too. Yeah. Okay. The ruins on the Cradle of the Accursed might be the coolest one.
Yeah, that's a really neat one. Like, it's very foreboding. It doesn't have an obvious answer to what it is.
Yeah. It makes zombies, so I'm assuming it's a zombie crib. I don't know. I don't know.
We don't know.
Well, I've clearly declared my favorite two cards here. Do you have a favorite out of everything we've looked?
Out of this set, I think my favorite, one of my favorite pieces that I often think about, just apropos of nothing, is the Cascading Cataracts.
Okay.
I really like this art and the depiction of the gods in
Yeah.
the waterfall. So this is something that I've often thought. Like, I've put this. I don't often play decks that have more than 3 colors. I don't often play decks that have more than 2 colors. But on the rare occasions that I have put together anything that could do 5, I've run this because I think it's pretty.
Nice. Special thanks to Chits and Cats for suggesting this
Yeah.
topic.
Yeah, thanks for suggesting this. This was fun to put together. I think Amonkhet is maybe not a place we want to visit, but a really fun plane to talk about.
Yeah. Do you remember the dress?
Yes, I do remember that.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So that happened in 2015, 9 years ago.
Has it been that long?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And these invocations came out 2 years later.
Uh-huh.
Come on. What is this thing doing?
Hey!
Look at that.
What do you
This
know?
is
that,
Threads of Disloyalty. Look at the
is
shades.
that the same thing?
I think it's a
I
reference.
think it might be.
So like the shades of color are the
Yeah.
same. They intentionally put it in the similar light level.
Yes.
And
It has the blue
yeah,
versus...
they have a contrasting color, which is like, so I have always seen the dress as gold
Yeah.
and white. I do not approach seeing black and blue, but that's
Yeah.
the other color.
Yeah, that's the alter. I see the white and gold right now. Like, we're looking
Yeah.
at it, and that's what I see as well.
Yeah.
Um,
I found that if I squint, I see the black and blue.
Yeah.
Train. It's so weird. But
but yeah, I've heard that is the alternative. Is that some people see this like black or like
Yeah.
navy blue.
and I think if that was their goal, if their goal was to truly recreate the effect, I don't think it worked because
Yeah.
they made the light source too obvious, so your brain
Yes.
parses it differently and more deliberately. But I really think that's what they were going for here. Don't you think?
Could have been on their mind. Yeah, I mean that's
Yeah.
like within the same.
I mean,
time
adding
frame. Yeah.
the second
Yeah.
set of colors there with that feels real deliberate. And Threads of Disloyalty, they're threads.
Yeah.
And I don't know, the disloyalty is kind of a stretch, but like
Yeah.
you
Yeah, I
work
don't
with
know
what you
about
got.
that. Yeah. Wow, I have not thought about that in a long time.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I think we're good. Bop, bop, bop.
Bop, bop.